is James Conway here with my erstwhile co-host Tenacious Tex.
Sorry we're a bit late. We had some incoming sniper fire after getting off the 171. Anyways, we're just going to get right down to business since we're running a couple minutes late. Today, we have so much to talk about with the elections, and our guest today knows elections quite well. His name is Mr. Carl Leubsdorf. He's a longtime Washington, D.C. political journalist. He is currently the Washington Bureau Chief for the Dallas Morning News, a post he's held since 1981. He is the current president of the Gridiron Club, the oldest and most prestigious journalistic organization in Washington, D.C., and former president of the White House Correspondents Association. He attended Cornell University, where he worked for the Cornell Daily Sun. He subsequently earned an MS with honors in journalism from the Columbia University Graduate School of Journalism. He's worked as a staff writer with the Associated Press, and as a political writer for the AP in the 70s, and also as a Washington correspondent for the Baltimore Sun. So he's been in D.C., I believe, for about 40 years now, and it's a pleasure for us to talk to him. Mr. Leubsdorf, how you doing, sir?
I'm doing great. Glad to be with you.
Well, thank you for spending time with us today. We're just going to get started right off the bat.
Sure.
We have 1,848 delegates for Barack Obama, the New York Times says. 1,686 delegates for Hillary Clinton. Nicholas Kristof, in his New York Times piece today, says that, quote, Hillary Rodham Clinton now has maybe a 2% chance of winning the Democratic nomination, but if she pursues her losing battle, she has perhaps a 20% chance of costing the Democrats the presidency in the fall. Senator Clinton does trail 700,000 votes in the cumulative popular vote, is behind pledged delegates, and lacks the number of states won. Yesterday, Tim Russert simply put it as, quote, we now know who the Democratic nominee is going to be, and no one's going to dispute it. Your piece on the Dallas Morning News today addresses these concerns, and so I have to ask you, is the Democratic primary season over?
Well, it's essentially over. You know, what Yogi Berra said, it isn't over till it's over. Well, we still have, a few states to vote. Barack Obama has not yet reached the number of delegates he needs to be nominated, but he's certainly within reach of that. And if everything goes over the next several weeks the way we expect it to go, in terms of three areas: one, the primaries, if they come out about the way we anticipate they will; secondly, the unpledged superdelegates begin to fall into line behind Obama as the likely nominee; and third, there's some kind of a settlement about this long-running dispute on the Florida and Michigan delegates. Every sign is that by the time the primaries end on June 3rd, within a few days of that, Barack Obama will have the delegates needed to be nominated.
Sure, and if that's the case, if those are the facts on the ground, what rationale does Hillary Clinton really have to stay in the race at this point? What does she have to gain?
In fact, as you mentioned, I have been covering these a long time, and candidates are always reluctant to get out before they have to. It's usually money that forces them out. With only 5 primaries to go, she may feel that, there's every reason for her to go through till the end and to run in those states. And what she's hoping, obviously, is that something might happen, probably not by the votes in a primary, that would somehow change the dynamic. And that there's always possible that there's an act of God or a disclosure or something that could happen. There's no real need for her, in her view, to get out till someone has gotten the number of delegates lined up to be nominated. And I think what many Democrats hope is that as she goes along in the next couple of weeks, if she persists in campaigning, she do it in a way that does not do any further damage to the likely party nominee. For example, going around saying that he can't win and she can win, things like that, or being directly critical of some of his proposals. So she has every right to stay in, and it looks like she's going to stay in at least another week or two, if not all the way to June 3rd.
Do you feel that there's a general concern now in the Democratic Party that Clinton is just not nearly as electable as Barack Obama, as you saw with Rush Limbaugh's Operation Chaos, and a lot of people saying if Hillary Clinton got the nominee, they vote for McCain?
I think that, the Rush Limbaugh is a great self-promoter, and, if he wants people to think that he somehow influenced the outcome, more power to him. The fact is that we don't know which is more electable. There's a lot of contradictory evidence on that. When you do matchups with Senator McCain, sometimes Obama comes out ahead in a stronger position, sometimes Hillary Clinton does. She makes the argument, of course, that she's strong among the base Democratic voters in states the Democrats have to win. He makes the argument that most of those will come into line and he can reach out to other states that she would not necessarily win. And there's some truth in both of those arguments, and it's, with any hypothetical, you can't quite analyze it. He definitely has some weaknesses. We've seen in recent primaries in the exit polls when Clinton voters are asked who they would vote for in the general election, these large proportion of them who say they'll vote for McCain or they just won't vote. In Indiana, for example, and in North Carolina, a third of the Clinton voters said they would not vote for Obama. Said they would vote for McCain. Actually, the number who said they wouldn't vote for Obama was even bigger. Now, most analysts don't think in the end that will happen, at least not nearly to that proportion. In Pennsylvania, where 25% of the Clinton voters said they would vote for McCain and 18% said they wouldn't vote, there's been one poll taken since the primary, a general election matchup. In that poll, both Clinton and Obama beat McCain, but Clinton beat him by a little more. So that sort of suggests that a lot of that vote comes back once the matchup with the Republicans is clear.
Right.
So I don't think you can. I think it's hard to know who is the stronger, but the fact is that barring something totally unexpected, Barack Obama is going to be the Democratic nominee, and so it's basically in the party's interest and the leadership to line up behind him and get as much lined up behind him as possible.
Right. Now, what do you think about these things, though, that Clinton's trying to make this sort of last push strategy to convince superdelegates that she's the most electable?
Sure, she is.
And today,
and why shouldn't she? But it's hard to make that case when the evidence, as I said, is very mixed. Interestingly, I think in both Indiana and in North Carolina, the exit polls showed that more people thought that Obama was the stronger candidate, even in Indiana, which Hillary Clinton won. And that's been the case in almost every state so far except Pennsylvania. That was the one place where the Democratic voters said that Hillary had the better chance of winning. So sure, she should make that case, but there's not much evidence to make that case.
Right.
Not enough for her to make it. Believe me, if we suddenly saw in a lot of the polling that she indeed was a much stronger candidate, and if there was statistical evidence, now I think it would have an effect on superdelegates. But to me, the superdelegates, there's several things that affect how they're going to go. One is, if one candidate has more delegates, more elected delegates, more popular votes, and won more states, that's a reason to back that person. Secondly, everyone knows that it's sort of unspoken, but not really, that African Americans are the strongest and most loyal constituency in the Democratic Party, and that if after the first serious African American candidate with a chance to be elected president had won 2/3 of the primaries and gotten more of the delegates, and if then unelected superdelegates took the nomination from him, there would be a tremendous uproar, and the convention would be a mess, and the party would probably sacrifice its chance of losing. So the superdelegates are not going to go against the African Americans, especially when the African American candidate is the one who's won all the primaries. And the third is, I think there's something of a myth that the Democratic Party is somehow a Clinton party. Now, there are a lot of people in the party who have great affection for Clinton, but there are a lot of others who recall that when Bill Clinton was being elected to 2 terms in the White House, the party was losing strength in Congress, and the party did not fare nearly as well as Bill Clinton fared. So I think there's genuine reluctance in many quarters to bring the Clintons back.